One of the core concepts in Express that you need to learn is the concept of middleware or middleware function. A middleware function is basically a function that takes a request object and either returns a response to the client or passes control to another middleware function. You have already seen two examples of middleware functions. One is this route handler function. So in Express, every route handler function we have is technically a middleware function because it takes a request object, and in this case, it returns a response to the client. So it terminates the request response cycle. So this is one example of a middleware function. We have another example that is on line 5. So when we call express.json method, this method returns a function, a middleware function. The job of this middleware function is to read the request, and if there is a JSON object in the body of the request, it will parse the body of the request into a JSON object, and then it will set request.body property. So essentially, this is what happens at runtime. When we receive a request on the server, that request goes through this pipeline. We call this pipeline the request processing pipeline. In this pipeline, we have one or more middleware functions. Each middleware function either terminates the request response cycle by returning a response object, or it will pass control to another middleware function. So in our current implementation, our request processing pipeline has two middleware functions. The first one is the middleware function that parses the request body into a JSON object. Now in this case, it doesn't terminate the request response cycle. So then it passes control to the second middleware function, which is in this case, our route handler. In our route handler, we have the request object with the body property populated. So here we can perform some operation and then terminate the request response cycle by returning a response to the client. So Express includes a few built-in middleware functions, but we can also create custom middleware functions that we can put at the front of our request processing pipeline. So every request that we get on the server will go through our middleware function. With this custom middleware function, we can perform cross-cutting concerns. For example, we can do logging, authentication, authorization, and so on. So an Express application is essentially nothing but a bunch of middleware functions. In the next lecture, I'm going to show you how to create a custom middleware function.